Welcome everybody to the BINA webinar. Today's topic is Torah's view on the death penalty. In most Western countries around the world today, the death penalty, capital punishment, has been abolished. That includes Israel and includes many countries in the EU. Some make an exception for war crimes and genocide, but a lone criminal who does a criminal act, even from the worst form, will not be killed as a result of that. The exception to that is in America, in the USA, where in some states it is still legal to administer the death penalty. Even there, it is very highly debated and may very well be abolished in the future. So on the one hand, we have some countries around the world who, on a daily basis, do unjust murders of innocent people and mass murder. And then there are other countries who are to the other extreme, that even in a lawful manner, even through a court, will not give a punishment of death. What is the Torah's view? How should a Jew look at this? What is the Torah's perspective on capital punishment, on the death penalty? So it's no secret that the death penalty is definitely a part of Torah. In fact, in this week's Parsha Shoftim, in this week's Torah portion, it is mentioned, definitely not limiting it to this week's Torah portion. It is mentioned in many places, and there are various types of death penalties spoken about throughout the Torah. The first thing I would like to do is to discuss it and explain it without putting any context to it. Just exactly what is written in the written Torah, in the Torah, without giving any background or explanations or context to it. However, a disclaimer: if you have listened till now and continue to listen, you need to listen all the way till the end, and that includes what we will discuss on Thursday. Because of course, without context, it can be taken the wrong way. First of all, what does it say? There are 4 different types of death penalties spoken about in the Torah. The Hebrew words for them are skila, sreifa, chenek, and herek, which means stoning, burning, which parenthetically it explains in the Talmud does not mean burning by fire, but it's through something else. Chenek, which means strangling, and hereg means death by the sword. For what were these punishments given? These punishments were reserved for the most severe of the Torah's of transgressions in the Torah, the most severe sins, including, but not limited to, the 3 worst sins: idolatry, idol worship, murder, and immoral relations. But again, there are more that we are just not going to get into the examples now, because that is a separate topic. What type of sin is so severe that deserves that the person should die for it? That is a different topic and a different concept. What I would like to discuss today is the very idea of having a death penalty. Now that we've discussed what it actually says, obviously in brief, let's try to give some context to it and some background. Before I do that, let me just explain what gives me the right to give context. If this is what it says, this is what it says. Am I trying to excuse what Torah says? Am I trying to explain it, downplay it? But of course not. The answer is, I am not giving you context. This is context that is given by our sages in the Talmud throughout all the generations. This is the oral law, our tradition that goes along with the written Torah. If you open up a Chumash, if you open up the written Torah, it is obvious. It is obvious that this was given together with a commentary, together with a tradition of how to learn this. Almost nothing makes sense without tradition, without the commentary from our sages. Just for example, the mitzvah of tefillin, the mitzvah for every Jewish man to put on tefillin every day. What does it actually say in the Torah? You shall bind on your hand as a sign and put it between your eyes. What should you put on your hand? How should it look like? What should be written there? What shape should it be? Nothing, doesn't say. Only through the oral tradition, the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, and what our sages have taught us, we actually know what the Torah means. So the same thing over here, and for sure, something as dramatic and as powerful as the death penalty. We cannot just take it out of context, and we need to examine the words of our sages that give light to this and to what it all means. And I would like to examine this on 4 levels. Number 1, first of all, we need to discuss what is morality. The issue that some take with the death penalty is a moral issue. It is immoral. And therefore, we need to define what is morality and who defines morality. Number 2, when discussing more specifically the death penalty, we need to discuss which type of court was allowed to give the capital punishment, who was eligible to be part of this court. Very important to know what type of judges were the ones giving this out. Number 3, what type of evidence is needed in order to make someone guilty of capital punishment? How often did this actually happen? And we will see, perhaps not today, probably on Thursday, that this didn't happen very often, and I will endeavor to show you that in places today where capital punishment does happen, it happens far more often than what would have happened in the Jewish court during temple times. And number 4, we will try to examine an esoteric meaning to all of this, a deeper meaning and a powerful lesson that this all gives to us. So let us first discuss the issue of morality. Who decides what's moral? What is morality? And the answer to that, in the Jewish view, is God and God only. Not human conscience, not human intellect. Let's take, for example, the innocent killing of human beings. Let's leave killing as a punishment for the moment. Let's just discuss innocent murder of another human being. Why is murdering an innocent person wrong? Most normal people would say, and hopefully this is the case, that it is not a humane thing to do. Basic human conscience doesn't allow a person to hurt another human being, let alone to kill them. Basic human intellect, basic human understanding lets us know and lets us understand that hurting somebody else, and for sure killing somebody else, is a wrong and immoral thing to do. So yes, a normal person feels that way. But is that the basis? Is that the reason why it is bad? Let's say tomorrow people decide intellectually that it isn't wrong. Let's say it comes a time when the human conscience doesn't stop people from murdering. Let's say the human conscience demands people to murder 6 million innocent Jews. Does it then become right? Does it then become a moral thing if so many people decide that it's right? The answer is obviously no. Because the reason why murder is bad, the murder of innocent people is bad, is not solely because of the human conscience, is not solely because of the human intellect, rather because this command, thou shalt not murder, comes from a God which transcends human conscience, which transcends human intellect, who he is the creator of the world, and only the creator can tell us how the creation should run, how we should be acting within his creation. And therefore, no matter what a human being will say tomorrow, doesn't make a difference because God doesn't change. God transcends all of us and all of what we feel. And that is the basis of morality. And if anything, the reason why a normal, sane human being just finds it absolutely crazy to even think of murdering somebody else, that nature was planted within us because God planted that nature within us, because he despises the idea of murdering another innocent human being. Since we now understand that it is God who decided that murder is wrong, then he alone is allowed to make an exception to that rule. Not murder innocent people, but killing as a form of a punishment. He has decided in our Torah that there are certain cases, certain sins, certain transgressions that are so severe that the person who does them is liable for the death penalty. However, and here comes a big however, we need to be absolutely certain that in this case, this is what God wants us to do. Any murder that someone would do in the name of God doesn't make it holy. In fact, sometimes it even makes it worse. If I just murder someone, and if someone murders someone in the name of God and claims that's what God told them to do, that just desecrates God's name. We need to be absolutely certain that in this case, indeed, God has commanded us to administer, to give the death penalty. How do we know when God wants us to do it? What it says in the Torah. What it says in the Torah as explained by our sages. Which leads me to my next 2 points, point 2 and point 3. and hopefully we'll get through point 2 today. What type of court, what type of people are eligible to be part of the Sanhedrin, of the High Court, which used to give the death penalty? Well, when we understand what type of people were sitting there, we'll understand that they weren't giving this type of punishment because they enjoyed killing people, rather only, and they would be very careful to examine and find out if indeed this case God wants them to do this. So first of all, the qualifications of the court. Only a court of 23 judges, minimum, can judge for capital punishment. A regular Jewish court, a Beth Din made out of 3 people, is unable to do so. It has to be a special court of 23 judges. Another qualification, there has to be at that period of time a high court situated by the temple. At least one person in that high court needs to have what's called smicha ish mipi ish mi Moshe Rabbeinu, which means that at least one judge has to have been appointed by another judge who was appointed by another judge who was appointed all the way back to Moses himself. It was a chain which didn't break, that one leader appointed the next leader who appointed the next leader. So we're talking about people which had a tradition all the way back from Moshe Rabbeinu. 40 years before the temple was destroyed, the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court, moved away from the temple, thereby abolishing the whole idea of the death penalty. Why did they do so? That itself is interesting, because there was a rise in murder, crimes amongst the Jewish people, and therefore they decided that if they stay where they are, they would actually have to give the death penalty more often than they wanted to. Therefore they decided, if we exile ourselves, if we move away from the temple, that qualification falls away, and therefore we will be unable to give the death penalty. Secondly, the type of judges on this court who were eligible to be part of this court had to be perfectly and 100% righteous. They needed to have what was called chachma, wisdom, yiras hachet, fear of sin, a hatred towards money. There weren't allowed to be people which loved and ran after money, a love of truth, a love of people, and people which had a good name. That was to be part of any court, in fact, even a regular court of 3 people which just judge monetary things, and how much more so to be part of the high court, which did give capital punishment. To be on the high court, another qualification, is that you needed to actually have children, because having children softens a person's nature and makes them more merciful. You didn't want people on the high court that didn't have mercy on people. To keep it from becoming corrupt, and judges being afraid from expressing their real opinion, the Jewish king was not allowed to be part of the court. If the Jewish king were to be allowed to be part of the court, no one would be able to freely express their opinion because it is forbidden to contradict the king. Therefore, the king actually was not part of the court. The court was independent from the king, and therefore everybody was able to express their true opinion, thereby getting to true justice. So to summarize what we did today, first of all, the death penalty is mentioned in the Torah and is a Torah concept. However, just to define what type of court is allowed to give this, that is allowed to administer the death penalty, we are talking about people which had a tradition all the way from Moses, were totally honest, feared sin, feared God, loved people, were loving towards another human being, were able to express their opinion openly without fear of a king. This is indeed a very moral system. On Thursday, we will discuss that even such a court, such moral and upright, righteous people, what they needed to go through in order to give the death penalty to somebody was a long process, and in fact hardly ever actually happened, far less than what would happen today in a country which does give the capital punishment, like America, for example. So stay tuned and have a good day.